Welcome. We're going to get started in just a second. Welcome again. Your phone line is muted. This webinar is being recorded, and the link to the recording and slides will be shared later. Hello, and welcome to our webinar on sports as a healing tool. My name is Leslie Bates. I'm the Director of Program and Systems Quality at the National Summer Learning Association. If you have any questions for our panelists while we are doing the webinar, please put them in the Q&A section. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of our webinar. Before we get started, a little bit about the National Summer Learning Association. NSLA is the only national nonprofit exclusively focused on addressing the achievement and opportunity gaps by increasing access to summer learning opportunities. NSLA's goal is to increase nationwide the number of high-quality summer learning programs. To achieve this goal, NSLA recognizes and disseminates what works, pursues support for programs and communities, and advocates for summer learning as a solution to equity excellence in education. NSLA's work is driven by the belief that all children and youth deserve high-quality summer learning experiences that will help them succeed in college, career, and life. Part of our work is recognition that high-quality summer learning programs work and have been shown to improve reading and math skills, school attachment, motivation, and relationships with adults and peers. We know that summer is a time of great inequity for young people, and we believe that promoting and supporting summer opportunities is a way to address this. This goes beyond the summer learning that's in our name. We also want to see programs and communities addressing access to other resources like meals and youth employment. Summer is a time of innovation and exploration. Without some of the constraints of the school year, kids are able to try different ways of learning and interact with other adults and peers they might not otherwise. It's also a time of innovation for adults, whether that's opportunities for professional development, trying out new teaching methods, or exploring new partnerships. So I'm happy to introduce our first speaker, Farlone Toussaint, Atlanta Program Officer for the Laureate Sport for Good Foundation, USA. Farlone?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. A quick little snippet about Laureate, and then we'll get right into our understanding of sport as a healing tool. If you want to go ahead and click the next slide, Leslie. Laureate is an intermediary funder that believes in the power of sport to change the world, as our patron saint Nelson Mandela said in 2000 during our initial Laureate Sports Awards. Yesterday was actually our 20th anniversary of the Sports Awards, so thumbs up to us. Keep going. Just a quick little snippet about our global network. So Laureate USA is under the umbrella of a chain of national organizations across the globe. So as you can see, we've got a strong reach and impact, not only in the United States, but also globally. One of the value propositions that we add to the world of sport-based youth development are our connections to our ambassadors and academy members. You can obviously look at that on our website, but I am going to mention them a little later when we talk about how we've been activating and creating community in this time of social distancing. And just a quick little snippet. Some of you on the call I can recognize, I know, and so you'll recognize some of the logos and folks here, just to give you some context on who we work with and the people who believe in the power of sport to change the lives of young people in the communities that they come from. So our mission is to improve the lives of young people and unite communities through the power of sport. And we do that. Go ahead to the next slide, Leslie. We do that in some really interesting ways, including improving well-being, educational attainment, ensuring gender equity, and addressing social justice and racial inequity. That happens in our grant making, that happens in our research and impact, that happens with our work with our Sport for Good Cities, which I'm a representative of, and it also includes the work that we do with our athletes and ambassadors. And again, those are the little buckets of work that we do in all of our cities: New Orleans, Atlanta, New York, Chicago. Say hello in the chat box if you represent any of those cities. I'd love to say hi to you too. Go ahead, Leslie. So I'm here to talk about how we decided to think about our role during this crisis and how we've been really changing our minds about what using sport as a healing tool can mean. Virtual training camp came from a place of true need. We did this after listening to the people in our network in the Sport for Good Cities and understanding that there were two major issues happening here. Number one, trainers and consultants, people who were providing a service to the sport-based youth development sector, were going to be suffering at this time in terms of people aren't going to be doing in-person trainings. People aren't going to be, that's the least of their concerns. And we know that that's a huge stakeholder category in the Sport for Good community. We also understood that just because there's social distance doesn't mean that there's social isolation. And one of the things we understand as a sport-based youth development organization is that sport is a healing tool in all things, whether it's mental, physical, but it's also a great way to interconnect with people. And it creates a really strong foundation for relationship and trust building. And so virtual training camp was truly created out of the voices of the communities that we serve and that we heard from. It really was a beautiful experience over the last 8 weeks to work with the likes of organizations like We Coach or Up to Us Sports or, the list can go on, from national organizations who are doing a great job of training people in this time of need, but also they did a great job of creating community with the technology platform that we used. So as you can see on this screen here, we used the meeting version instead of the webinar version, so people could see one another and also participate in breakout rooms. Our trainers did a phenomenal job of creating community in a way that I don't think I've ever seen on a virtual platform. And I really must say that the kudos really does belong to the trainers that were participants in creating that community. We also had athletes, if you want to go to the next slide, Leslie, who came on during every single session and did some form of physical activity or some form of meditation to get people ready to receive or ready to communicate or ready to invest time and energy into one another. And I think that was one of the components of what we did that really proved that sport is a healing tool, because, everybody's got Zoom meetings going on right now. I see a question here about what virtual we used Zoom. And we used Zoom with very specific kinds of tactics. So if you look in the settings of Zoom, you can actually mute everyone. So what we did was make sure that there wasn't a cacophony of voices and people talking, but we really utilized the chat box as a way to make interaction. And then we broke out into groups. So every trainer had a way to make sure that people were really communicating and keeping in touch. And again, it was a phenomenal experience. We're looking forward to the feedback from the community to continue to push this through. But I think, again, the athletes and the physical activity that happened during and before every session really did a great job of creating community for people who are stuck at home, homeschooling, or working from home, and it was difficult. But I think that we did our best in our little corner of sport for social change to make an impact. I'm gonna keep it moving. and answer questions at the end, but I appreciate the time. If you want to participate in these going forward, join us at connect.laureususa.com.
Okay, thank you, Farlan. So next we're going to hear from Jamison Merrill, Chief Program Officer of Up to Us Sports. Jamison?
Yep. Thanks, Leslie and Farlan. I am going to get my screen ready. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be talking with you today and joining this webinar about the healing power of sports. As the representative of Up to Us Sports, a coach training and placement organization, I will be talking about the healing power of sports coaches at this time. So our mission as a national nonprofit is to recruit, train, and support sports coaches to inspire youth programs in their communities. We have a vision that all youth have access to a trained coach to help them achieve their potential in life. And we know that the current pandemic is, changing the game, around the world for youth, their access to sports, their access to mentors. And we especially know from many years in the field of mentoring the power that these caring adult relationships can have on youth. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the strategies today, and also as a service organization, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, kind of the unique place that we have as an organization during this moment. So Up to Us Coach. So we're the only national AmeriCorps program for coaches. So that means we place and then train coaches in community partner organizations throughout the country. We partner with 115 plus organizations throughout the country to place our AmeriCorps volunteers. Since 2010, we've placed over 2,800 AmeriCorps coaches, and we've reached 200,000 youth with year-round sports and positive youth development programming. We also train coaches across the country, in addition to the training that we do for our AmeriCorps volunteers. And so we've trained since 2010, 22,000 coaches. So this gives you a little sense of our reach. We're a nationwide organization with offices or headquarters in New York City, and we have offices along the East Coast, the South, the Southeast, and then the West Coast, including Northern California, Los Angeles, the Pacific Northwest, and then Chicago. So Up to Us Sports during COVID-19, just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we've been able to do. So we've maintained all of our coaches on staff and payroll, and that's something we're really proud of. And that's really in large part due to some changes AmeriCorps has made to accommodate the changing kind of lives of their volunteers. That means these 215 coaches have continued to receive their living stipends. At this time, we're also providing them with free counseling through AmeriCorps for those coaches who might need some extra support with their own mental health. And I'll talk about the importance of coach wellness in a second here. And then we're providing some things for our coaches. So biweekly training on things like self-care, how to design distance coaching sessions. And then they are also, where possible, given their context and their organization, they are conducting virtual sessions with youth. Depending on comfort then, they might also go out into their communities to do direct service, helping organizations focus on basic needs, for example, at food banks. And then more recently, through our partnership with the Corporation for National Community Service, We've launched a summer associate program, which is a VISTA program, and we are providing these summer associates as relief to other sport-based youth development and youth-serving nonprofit organizations throughout the country. And I will also talk about that in a second. So this is just a quick background. We're limited on time and I won't go into it, but this gives you a sense of the kind of the data that we're drawing from to justify our work. I'd like to focus on the during and post-COVID section and really point you to a lot of the information that we know now. You know, that kids who have been quarantined are more likely to show signs of PTSD. You know, the economic downturn that we've experienced with businesses closing, you know, that has mental health implications for our young people due to kind of trickle-down effects. A recent poll from the Kaiser Family Foundation shows that, you know, that half of Americans feel that COVID has affected their mental health in some way. And so why does that matter? Well, our guiding principles are that mental and physical health are two sides of the same coin, that coaches play a pivotal role in maintaining and cultivating positive mental health for young people. Positive mental health of coaches, though, is a prerequisite for positive mental health of youth, and relationships founded on mutual respect, trust, and praise help buffer the stress for young people. So with those in mind, we already know that sport is a powerful healer. A 2019 study found that youth who participate in team sports were less likely to develop symptoms of depression later in life. We know the interaction of coach mentors helps build resilience and lowers depressive symptoms for young people. And I provided some of these sources for you to go and do some further investigation. But as I referenced, you know, coach wellness is really important. And we believe that definitely at Up to Us Sports, this idea that you put on your oxygen mask first before then putting it on the person next to you. And so coaches must first prioritize this. And so at Up to Us, we've been providing structured training on the importance of self-care. We do structured or semi-structured reflection and debriefing, both in groups and individually. And that's through kind of our robust network of programmatic support that we have throughout the country. And we're continuously trying to refine our referral protocols for coaches who are in need of support with mental health. So now I'll talk a little bit more about our coach training. And this is to equip them with the skills to go then work with youth who are maybe experiencing these adverse childhood experiences. And our coach training really provides coaches with an understanding of how stress and trauma affects the brain of their players or mentees, how personal and community context affects the behaviors of their players, and how to leverage these trust-based relationships to improve wellness and build self-efficacy and confidence. And so we do that through a few things. We do that through individual level things like using look, listen skills. So really actively observing behaviors in kids and creating practices to meet their needs. We talk about coaching for outcomes, which is linked to that previous thought of once you've identified something, how do you then design a lesson plan or a practice to help, you know, build, for example, social and emotional learning skills, these kind of life skills that are definitely in line with things that you learn through sport. And then there are environmental factors as well that we really, and strategies that coaches can use. So things like cultivating a safe space and building positive team culture. So I also just wanted to talk real quickly about returning to play. And as a service organization, we are really thinking now is the time to leverage service and mentoring. Young people, as we know, are hugely impacted by this crisis, and definitely those entering the workforce A lot of our coaches are often that 18 to 24-year-old age range. And as we know, unemployment has soared above 25% at this time. And so not only can our program be a place for youth to heal, and that can be through their relationship with coaches, but actually through the coach experience, they themselves can heal from this time. They can give back to their community and then go on to kind of help youth and communities heal. We feel right now we're really focused on first response, but we're getting to that phase where we're starting to think about the importance of a second response, or these second responders. And we feel that coaches or summer camp workers play that role. And then we're also rethinking how, we need to be a safe, rethinking safe play and sport and mentoring, and especially around mental health approaches. So what new skills do we need to provide our coaches with to better support the youth that they work with? And these are things that we're actively considering, as we enter the summer. And finally, we have some resources that we would like to share with you. So our Up to Us Sports at Home platform is a place that we've added a lot of tools and videos from our coaches throughout the country. Our Keep Girls in Sport digital training gives you a sense of kind of the methodology we use and the key content areas that we train our coaches on. And then lastly, as I referenced our Summer Associate program, we are placing these no-cost VISTA positions, to interested organizations throughout the country. I think these slides will be shared with you, but you can access the application, the informational webinar, which we recorded, program guide, and frequently asked questions through that link there. The deadline does close tomorrow, so if you're interested, you'll have to work quickly to get an application in, and we would look forward to hearing from you. Finally, I've given you my contact information here. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Jameson. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the slides will be shared later. Also, if you have any questions for our panel, please put them in the Q&A box. We'll try to catch them in the chat box, but sometimes they get lost in there. So if you have a question that you would like asked during our question and answer period, please put it in the Q&A box. So next, I'd like to welcome Daniel Hatcher, Director of Community Partnerships at the Alliance for a Healthier Generation.
Thanks, Thanks, Leslie. It's wonderful to be with you all today. And I'd actually like to start with a reflection activity. You're going to notice that the theme of my presentation is really around coach wellness and resiliency, and hopefully some resources that you can share with families as well. So we're going to start by checking in virtually. I know many of you are used to doing opening circles when you're coaching and working with students. So on your screen is an image of a person balancing multiple plates. And these plates are labeled health, students, home, work, uncertainty. So who else is feeling this way? And feel free to write in the webinar chat box. Anybody else feeling like you're balancing a lot of plates? Sasha says, yep, I do, me, yes. Bonnie, you are truly, yep. Well, thank you all for sharing that. So first, just want to acknowledge that we know that you're balancing a lot and there's a lot of stress and uncertainty. So I hope the resources I share are things that you can put into practice and use. These are resources that you can use virtually or in person as well. So I recently heard the statement, it's hard to be inspirational if you're not inspired. So I'll say that again. It's hard to be inspirational if you're not inspired. And coaches, informal and formal, provide those protective factors for kids experiencing adversity. And when I think informal coaching, I feel like there's a lot of families and parents right now, grandparents are taking on this role to help children develop lifelong love of sports and movement and physical activity. So it's very important that you protect yourself. And so I want to do an activity with you all, and I hope you'll participate. Actually, I will, I'm going to turn my video. There we go. Hi, everybody. So the first thing we're going to do is there's a slide. If you're following along on a computer, there's a slide with some clouds, and I want you to look at those clouds. And if you're sitting next to a window, you can peer out the window as well. Farlone, I think I saw you sitting next to a big, nice window. So let's take 3 deep breaths together. And this is a really important practice you can do. You know, no matter what you're facing, it's just to take a few seconds to ground yourself. So let's take a big deep breath in. A big deep breath out. We'll do another one. Get comfortable. If you've been sitting and you want to do this standing up, you're more than welcome. Big deep breath in. Hold it. Let it out really slow. And we'll do one more big deep breath. Hold it, let it out. So you always have that breathing that you can come back to. So if you're leading a virtual training, or if you're on the phone with families all day, or you're dealing with your own personal stuff, just try and find time to return to that breath. You can think about those clouds. If the weather's cooperating, you can head outside and do that, looking at the clouds. But you know, thinking about wellness for coaches, mindful breathing is a really important strategy to keep in your back pocket. So now we're going to do another one. I'll do this on video, and it's the stretching as an I, as a Y, and as a T. So if you're sitting at your desk like I am, I'm actually sitting at my dining table, stretch up as far as you can. You're making an I. You can squeeze your fist, shake out your hands. Then you're going to move your hands in the shape of a Y. Shout out to our friends at the YMCA. And then a T. Your arms are out at a T. And you can, of course, adapt this in lots of different ways. So again, the idea is that you just take a few seconds to ground yourself and be present and you know, accept the challenge of the day, but feel more in control as you return to your breath and get a little bit of movement in. So again, those are always in your back pocket to use and to support yourself as coaches and mentors. All right, Leslie, can we go to the next slide? So another resource I wanted to share with you all is from Healthier Generations partner, Sanford Harmony. And as so much learning is going digital now, creating that connection, Farlone said it best, social distance doesn't have to mean isolation. These quick connection cards are a great way to connect with kids and families and have kids connect with each other. I've been adding one of these quick connection cards to almost every virtual training I've done in the last 3 or 4 weeks. This is my favorite card. I always ask this question: what has made you feel proud? So if you don't mind, would love you to answer that question. What's made you feel proud? And if it makes it easier, you can write in something that's made you feel proud in the last few weeks. So what has made you feel proud? Family, grandkids, new apartment, Zoom fitness classes, feeding young people and families. So there are a lot of silver linings that, again, we can come back to. It's just like that deep breathing. So when you feel stressed, if you're looking to inspire yourself before you inspire others and connect with families and kids, you can come to these questions. Again, I really like this one. You could add this in your next training. You can get the whole set of cards. I'll put the link in the chat box here. This will take you to the Alliance for a Healthier Generation website, where we have segmented out these resources by families, providers, and businesses. So again, really like this question. Thank you for participating, by the way. All right, Leslie, we can keep going. So here's another activity for your back pocket. We won't, for time, we won't actually do this, although you could probably do it in a few seconds. So this is called Rainbow Roundup, and a nice self-care grounding activity. This comes from the Healthier Generation Active at Home Scavenger Hunt. It's as simple as looking around you, could be in your dining room, could be in your living room, and identifying items that represent different colors of the rainbow. So yellow for pineapple, or green for grass out the window, orange for oranges. Just a moment, an activity resource to go back to ground yourself. You can also just do textures. You can see the slide. I found 4 things that have the color green in them. So lots of different ways to mix this up. Again, simple activity to share with kids and families, and to practice yourself, of course. So the last resource I have for you is also from Healthier Generations, Moving More at Home suite of resources. This comes from our family activity planning guide. There's a family activity tracker. And I really like the statement that if you want social emotional learning and physical health to happen, you have to plan for it. So this tracker is a great way to do that. It's a free download. You can find that on the Healthier Generation webpage as well. Again, a simple way to kind of write down and think through which practice you might want to incorporate in your day. So I'll stop there, and excited to answer any questions later on, but thank you, Leslie.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And finally, we'll hear from our last speaker, Adam Harper, Senior Director of Youth Basketball Development from the NBA. Adam?
Thank you, Leslie and Daniel. I like a lot of those exercises, and that's been something we've tried to weave into different types of programming that we've hosted kind of through this time. And I'm extremely thankful and proud of family during this time, being located in New York, being able to then relocate back to the DC area with family has truly been a blessing, and kind of allowed me to focus more of my attention, on continuing to push forward the work that we're doing kind of at the NBA, especially during this time. And we launched NBA Together, which coming out of kind of the, kind of March 11th, if you remember, is kind of the Wednesday night when, an NBA player kind of tested positive, and then we suspended the league and went on that hiatus. And coming out of that, we launched NBA Together, which is just kind of our campaign to kind of really drive support and helping those communities, the families, inspire youth, fans, kind of in terms of how to respond to the pandemic that we're all facing. And so as part of that, we made a commitment as a league, to contribute to the efforts. And again, what I'm proud of is I can say that we have kind of surpassed that commitment and raised, over $88 million, to support kind of coronavirus response efforts. And that comes from the entire NBA family. That's from the league office, which is where kind of I sit in terms of youth basketball development and the junior NBA. But that includes our teams, our owners, our players. And when we talk about kind of NBA Together, that's all of our leagues. That's the NBA, the WNBA, the G League, and the 2K League, as well as the Basketball Africa League, which was recently announced right before the pandemic. And so kind of as part of that campaign, Leslie, if you move to the next slide, kind of there are 4 elements, 4 pillars of that campaign. Kind of know the facts, acts of caring, expand your community, and NBA Together Live. And so know the facts is really what we came out the gate with, we were all taken aback by the situation, and we wanted to use our platform to spread awareness and just educate people on what is the coronavirus, what is the current situation, worldwide, what is the current situation in the U.S. and Canada, which is where a lot of kind of our players reside. How is the NBA responding to it? How can you as an individual, again, one of our fans, we're really just talking to the whole NBA family. How can you respond to it and do your part? And a lot of that, what we kind of felt at the beginning stages was just education. And so that was just based on our consultation with, public health experts, government officials, just kind of synthesizing and putting all that information out through our channels, which presumably and oftentimes reach a different audience than some of our just traditional news outlets. And so just, again, trying to use our platform to do our part and raise the awareness. Acts of caring is, again, the kind of our framing for that pillar of the initiative was to inspire 1 million acts of care, acts of kindness, kind of in support of the coronavirus support efforts. And so we partnered with 25 plus community organizations, many that we work with in other parts of our business throughout the year, and some new, including the American Red Cross, Boys and Girls Club of America, just large national organizations, Covenant House. But Daniel, to your point, one of the things that we noticed and know is true, not only during this time, but is probably exacerbated during this time, but just in general, is there's a mental health aspect to this too. And so we worked very closely with the Child Mind Institute, the JED Foundation, Crisis Text Hotline, many other organizations like that, again, to make sure that as many people as possible are aware of resources that are available to them, are aware that they're not in this alone, and that there's still opportunity for us to use our platforms, our organizations, to improve the lives of our communities. Kind of the next pillar of that initiative is to expand your community, and this is where my group and I've spent a lot of our time, and a major component of the expand your community efforts have been our Junior NBA at Home content series, which is a daily content series where, and it's actually kind of, we've had a few iterations over these last, 9 weeks or so, but primarily just trying to make sure that we provide opportunities and ways for young people to stay active and healthy, both physically active and mentally kind of healthy during this time. We know how important, as our other panelists have spoken to, how important sports is in kind of the development of young people and just in our everyday lives. And it's not just the young people, it's the parents who, have that routine of their kids being involved in sports. It's the coaches who, that is a way that they, find joy and fulfillment in their lives in terms of being able to give back. And so just trying to create, again, as much opportunity for people to maintain that connection and sense of community, through sport. And so I'll talk a little bit more about the Expanding Community Program as we move through this. But the last pillar was NBA Together Live. And this was really kind of aimed at thinking about the broader NBA community, our fans, and how do we continue to engage them, although, the ball is not bouncing in arenas, during this time. And so over the course of the hiatus, we've leveraged all of the social media platforms, engaged kind of our players, kind of the personalities that are associated with our game to just, drive conversations. Many some tied to the game, but many other kind of conversation topics that just address kind of the things that we're all dealing with right now as a society at large. And through that pillar, it also, we have tried to bring forward classic games, things that can still give you a little bit of a fix for kind of the content that is sports. And while not part of NBA Together Live, obviously during this time, one of the things, the NBA as a league was proud of was the Last Stand series and other kind of different pieces of content that, have created a lot of engagement and connection, to not only to our sport, but to sports in general, kind of during this time. And so, Leslie, if you can actually skip 2 slides, I'm going to come back to the next one. Go one more. Yeah. And so, we've been proud of the type of engagement we've been able to drive. It's been without having live NBA content, I would say that we've done a tremendous job just the cross-organizational collaboration to try to, like I said, reach as many people as possible, and again, across these pillars, deliver messaging and content that we think allows us to lift up our communities. And so I'm not going to go through each of these word by word, but you can see in terms of just getting out the educational kind of elements, over 60 million video views. We have our NBA Together virtual roundtable series, which has launched kind of mainly in the last month, and that was as some of this kind of educational piece of what to do kind of now became ingrained in public consciousness, raising awareness of the fact that this disease has disproportionately impacted communities of color, and so we launched a virtual roundtable series in partnership with the National Urban League and others, to kind of bring that conversation to light, and again, spread awareness to those that might not be getting kind of that information in the other kind of facets of their life. And so it's something that is tremendously important to us, and we are looking to continue to build out in the coming weeks. The acts of caring, one of the things, one of the other panelists talked about just being a service organization. The NBA feels the same way. And so it was important to us to make sure that we, how can people still be of service to their communities during this time? Virtual volunteerism, just this past weekend with Memorial Day, writing letters to military families, just finding those ways to continue to support during this time. And then the Expand Your Community, we've been really excited about the level of engagement we've had, and we've been blessed with our NBA players kind of having a little bit more time on their hands than they normally do. And so we've been able to, we developed, I think, almost 120 pieces of content in the last, 8 or 9 weeks. 55 of those, I believe, have had NBA and WNBA player representation. Another, close to 40, I think, had NBA coaches or assistant coaches engaged. And so just being able to leverage, again, our broader NBA family to kind of create these pieces of content that many of you can leverage. I know that one of the things is how do you keep young people engaged during the summer? These pieces of content are housed on juniornba.com and is just a library that you can leverage as you look for different ways to to engage youth. And we know that it's not all just about the physical activity and the basketball. And so, in partnership with AT&T, we did NBA Math Breaks, where we're just using different elements of the game to teach math concepts. And that's been, that was a 4-week series, and that gained a lot of positive kind of engagement as well. And so if we can just go back one slide, I will just briefly talk about 2 events that we hosted that we thought we want to do more of, and actually believe that there's opportunity to do kind of even when we come out of this. One of the things, we've always had we've done forums and engaged kind of our broader network in through different events, especially in the spring and summer, we're very event-based. And one of the things that we have learned through this is that some of these events we can do in a virtual way, or have a virtual element included in, which does allow the reach to be even greater. We still do think that in-person programming allows, a different type of impact to be driven. But our Her Time to Play event, right after the WNBA draft, we had 4 draftees, and we hosted this in partnership with the Women's Sports Foundation, where we had, I think nearly 100 girls ages 11 to 16 on a Zoom conference call. That, again, the girls shared a little bit about their experience, kind of just being drafted, what they were doing kind of during this time. But then the youth players just were able to have a kind of open dialogue with them. We tried to manage the chaos as one of the panelists alluded to earlier with the mute buttons, but it was a great conversation, much more, probably our most interactive event, and the 100 or so girls that got to participate, really enjoyed it. And then most recently, we had our Junior May Leadership Conference, which we have moved, it typically has come to life as an in-person event tied to NBA Combine in May. We've really tried to bring together kind of key stakeholders in the youth basketball space, and has typically kind of had participation around, in the 500 people range. And then through this, moving it virtual just allowed us to kind of, again, a different type of engagement, but, we had, I think, over, 4,000 registrants. And so just being able to broaden, and then the viewership was much more significant as well. And so just moving to a virtual program where, again, we still got to deliver the important topics. We got to, again, reach probably more people than we otherwise would have, is just a lesson that kind of we'll take out of this. And so, how can we continue to do these things as well as in-person programming, when the time is right to return. And then lastly, before opening up to questions, is just that we've also, increased our communication. We speak weekly with representatives from our youth basketball counterparts at our NBA and WNBA teams, and just staying abreast of how do we kind of navigate this summer, which is, critical for many of our teams. And then, how, as we start to think about returning to play, how would we kind of do that in a safe and healthy way? So it's been, again, just going back to what Daniel said, it's been something that, we've been extremely proud of in terms of being able to maintain this connection and engagement with young people kind of through this time. Leslie, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Adam. So we have some time now for some questions. We have quite a few in our Q&A box, but if you have a question for our panelists, we're going to try to get through as many of them as we can in the time that we have left together. Panelists, if you can turn your videos back on now. So let's get us started off. Jameson, we have quite a few. We have like 3 questions about the AmeriCorps vistas. So I'm going to ask them all together. It's kind of rapid fire. So somebody wanted to know what the process is for getting AmeriCorps volunteers. They wanted to know how lengthy is the application for the VISTA positions, and can the application be extended by a day or 2? since they just heard about it.
Great. Yeah. So what I'll do real quickly is I will add in the link to access the information about this the F2S Sports Summer Vista program. So you should be able to get more information on about that there. I also included my email if you are interested in learning more about our coach placement program. So you can get in touch with me there. And then in terms of extending the deadline, unfortunately we can't. This opportunity came to us a little bit late, and so we don't have that much time to onboard all of the volunteers, and so we have to stick to the deadline for tomorrow. But the application is not super long, so I think that it's something that you could get done with in a pretty quick time frame. So hopefully that answers all of the questions about that Summer Vista program opportunity.
Thanks, Jameson. So we have a couple of questions here that I'll try to summarize and this is for anybody. People are wanting to know what sports actually look like, or if you can provide an example of what a sport activity would look like via Zoom or virtually.
Yeah, I'll take that. A lot of it is again, when we first started, it was really in your home, different dribbling and fitness exercises that, if you're on a Zoom call, if you're and you're able to kind of see the screen and see your teammates or your players, you can just lead them through different activities that can be done in home. As we're now kind of, what we've seen a shift is now where, okay, some teams or some of our youth organizations that we engage with are trying to kind of put content out that then people can have on their phone and available to them, kind of an on-demand type of content where they can take it to, if they have a basket outside, or if there's a public space that they're able to utilize, that does open up in a safe way, that they can kind of host that there. But we've seen mostly been leveraging Zoom. Ring Central, which is a platform I'm not entirely familiar with, is another platform that a couple of our partners have used as well.
Somebody else wanted to add anything? We have questions about Harlon, about where you offer any internships. Some people asked about the New York area. I think somebody asked about Houston, Texas. So where are those happening?
Yeah, so we're technically in 4 Sport for Good cities. That's New York, Chicago, New Orleans, and Atlanta. Right now, we only offer that sort of thing in New York City because that's where our administrative headquarters are. And obviously right now, no one's in the office, so we aren't really looking for interns at the moment. But if you would like to keep in touch with us, and when those opportunities do arise, I would suggest following our social media channels at Laureus_USA. That's where that information would go out first and foremost.
Great, thank you. And for those of you offering any kind of training, do people get a certificate for those trainings, or for any of the modules or that they might access through your organizations?
I'll say for us, it just depends on the trainer. So we've got connections with national organizations like Safe Sport, where after you go through that experience, you will get a certificate that says that you've been, adequately trained in the areas of child protection policies and, very important, obviously, subjects. But then there are other trainings that aren't necessarily certifications, but very important to you being able to administer your programming, whether virtually or in person. So it just kind of depends on who we partner with. At Laureus, we try our best not to act like the subject matter experts, but rather connect the subject matter experts to the people who need them the most. So it just depends on what that subject matter expert has in terms of certification processes.
We have a question here from someone who's having challenges getting coaches that are dedicated to giving to the youth. Any recommendations around identifying staff, training staff?
Yeah, I can speak really quickly to that. I think one thing that we find is we have a pretty robust system of coach recruitment. We're really trying to engage their, at least from our point of view, their interest in sport, but also the kind of the other parts of sport that we're really interested in, the life skills, the social emotional well-being pieces, and really gauging their passion on both of those fronts. We often find that we have a lot of success recruiting through the organizations that we partner with. So a lot of our partner organizations, actually, those youth who rise out of the program, maybe who are taking a gap year before going to college or who are going to college part-time, they end up being the coaches. And they really are, of course, passionate about the program. They've been in since they were 10, and they know the program, the methodology really well. And so that's another kind of recruitment strategy that has worked really well for us. So hopefully that helps answer some of that question.
I'll just add to that. You might also check in with your local park and recreation office. I think most folks have seen Parks and Rec have really stepped up this summer, offering meals and really playing that first responder role. Healthier Generation has had a great partnership with them. And so local Park and Rec, if they haven't been on your list of recruitment partners or folks to touch base with right now, would be perhaps something to check out.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and I know Adam needs to leave us right at the hour, and those of you who need to leave us at the hour, we'll try to get some of these questions, the answers to some of these questions to you later, but for those of you who are able to stay on past the top of the hour, we'll try to get to a couple more. But I wanted to have one last question for everybody while we have everybody here. Can you talk about why sports is uniquely suited to help kids heal?
Yeah, I'll start. I think that sports give kids an opportunity to learn kind of and develop character in a way that many other things can't. The camaraderie, being able to work together as a team, being able to lead, resilience, just the overall development that I think a child gets kind of through sport, and then many times it's a escape, from different situations, and where they're able to be most at peace with themselves, be most comfortable, and so I think kind of through all of that, kids are able to kind of grow both kind of in their personal development, and also kind of just staying fit and healthy in their just physical development, which I think is important to the overall kind of wellness and well-being of young people.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of that, Adam, and say, one of the things that I know for a fact, just from my own experience as a young person who came from the communities that are currently suffering the most from this crisis, that trauma starts from your brain, and that sport in particular, from my friends from We Coach and my friends from Up to Us Sports have taught me that, in your brain, there are things that are going on that can be counteracted through physical activity, through creating connections with people like coaches who you can trust, who are consistently in your life. Sport also has a very powerful and unique way of teaching us how to manage stress. And it's so important to understand that in a sports or a play setting, when you're being physically active, what you're really learning or what you're really doing is putting yourself in a stressful situation. And being able to take that and actually implement that into your life is not only a life skill, but it is an actual physical response that can only really ever happen in the act of play or in the actual act of sport and physical activity. And so it's such a great question to ask, you know, why is sport so uniquely positioned? Because those kinds of activities actually rewire our brains. And there is an actual physiological response when you are participating in an activity like sports and physical activity that create literally healing benefits to participating. I think it's so important to understand that it's not only, to Adam's point about like the life skills that a child can build, but it's also about the kind of healing that an entire community can experience through being physically active and through actually moving their bodies, and how that rewires your brain.
Thank you. So I think we'll try to get to one or two more questions. So there's a question about how to provide sports to children with no contact, no ball guidelines. So maybe as programs might be coming back online and being in person. And before you answer that, let's put a plug in that we're having a webinar next week with the director of the American Camp Association, who's going to be going over CDC, ACA guidelines, and child care guidelines. So we have a whole webinar next Thursday on safety guidance and regulations. But any advice around how to provide sports to children with no contact guidelines?
I think you referenced it. I think that there are a couple players in our space that are, you know, really doing a lot of the initial thinking about this. The CDC is one of them, and obviously a credible organization in that. And they actually just had a webinar on Friday on youth sports and safety. This past Friday, I believe if you try and search out the webinar, you could find the recording. Of course, Leslie just mentioned that it sounds like you'll be going through those policies. And then the Aspen Institute has also been kind of thinking through some of the sports-specific safety protocol that you could look at with some more time.
Great. And I think those are all the questions that I see right now. Any last thoughts to share with the audience? Or recommendations, advice for the summer? You know, a lot of people are putting their summer program, the final touches on their summer programs right now.
I will say, you know, being in Atlanta, where most of the country knows that we're one of the very first states to open back up. You know, one of the things that we're seeing and realizing is that we already knew that, you know, the Black and brown communities are being affected the most by the COVID crisis already, due to the inequities that were happening way before this kind of global pandemic hit us. And one of the things that we've been working with our grantees, or the folks who are recipients of our dollars, is truly being culturally sensitive to those understandings and being aware that if a mom does not feel comfortable sending her kid to camp because she knows that someone in their family lost their life to the crisis, it's important to be aware and not leave those kids out, right? If you're gonna still do summer camp, try your best to be thoughtful and inclusive, especially sensitive to families coming from the most hard to reach communities, because they're the ones that really actually do need your thought and attention. And be aware of the fact that internet access is obviously more of a luxury than it is a necessity. And try your best, if you're a program operator or someone who is operating as a community organizer to be truly and deeply mindful of the people you could be leaving out just because you want to get something done, or because you got to check the box off and say you got summer camp done.
That's so well said, Farlon. The only thing I'll add is take that message to your local school districts. And if you represent a summer learning program, an out of school time program, connect with your school district, figure out what their post-COVID plan is, and infuse that resilience into what they're planning. Find out what the game plan is, and get yourself to that table.
And then I guess if I had a final comment, it would just be to reiterate kind of what Daniel spoke to and what I spoke to as well around, kind of coach or service provider wellness. I think it's, even more than ever, we really need to think about the stress that, our peer role models, our, coaches will be coming into the program with. And I think there's a lot of really nice, guidelines out there and content to really think about and help coaches through that healing process before they themselves go and work with youth. So I think that's just going to be really important right now, and hopefully we can kind of support those people as well.
Thank you. So I want to say thank you to everybody who attended today. Thank you to our panelists. Just a couple of announcements. Look out for more in our Voices of Summer webinar series. As I mentioned, we have some webinars coming up next week on family engagement and run around program safety guidance. And this Thursday, we're having one on the art of virtual learning. Also look out for announcements about our National Summer Learning Week. That will be July 6th through the 11th. It's a time for us to celebrate and advocate for the importance of summer and summer programs. And finally, if you're not following us already on social media, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, actually. That's the best place to hear new announcements about new resources, events that are coming out. You can also join our community by joining our email list, our newsletter list. You'll have the opportunity to sign up for the newsletter or join special cohorts of peers that are interested in specific topics like sports or literacy or youth employment. You can also find out more about NSLA's consultation, support, and technical assistance for your summer program. So thank you again. A link to the recording for this and the slides will be shared probably tomorrow. So thank you for joining. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.